Welcome back to Unboxing OD. I'm your host, Kenneth Pearson, and I'm glad that you're here. This episode is going to feel a little different. Not because I designed it that way, but because something in me shifted, and I knew I had to let that shift guide the conversation. What you're about to hear is one extended, personal reflection told in 5 movements. It's not going to be heavy on frameworks or methodologies. Instead, it's going to explore the human side of work, the parts we rarely name out loud. We'll talk about what it feels like to show up in a role while holding parts of yourself back. We'll explore the space that lives between people and how it shapes what's possible. We'll get into the truths we carry but don't always speak. We'll talk about the ways we drift from ourselves and each other and how we find our way back. And finally, we'll look at the quieter kind of legacy we leave behind, the trace we create, sometimes without even realizing it. If you've ever felt yourself negotiating between the version of you the work asks for and the version you truly are, or if you've ever sat with the quiet ache of not saying what you needed to say, this episode might meet you where you are. So grab a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin. Part 1. The work beneath the work. There's the version of me people meet, the organizational development professional who's calm in chaos, who knows how to read a room, craft a strategy, and hold space when the air feels thick. The one with solutions, or at least with better questions than the ones on the table. And then there's the version of me that wakes up most mornings wondering which parts of myself I'll need to set aside before I walk into the day. Because the work doesn't always want all of me. Sometimes it wants the neutral version, the polished version, the version that can take a sharp comment and fold it into silence because it's not the right time to push back. The version that can package a difficult truth so neatly that it won't catch in anyone's throat. The version that can sit quietly through the meeting, keep the temperature even, and make sure nothing derails the agenda. It's not that I'm being fake. It's that I've learned over time which parts are safe to bring into the room and which ones I need to keep tucked away in a notebook, in my car, or with the people who actually know me. That's the work beneath the work. It's the constant calibration of self, the invisible labor of deciding how much space you're allowed to take up, the subtle reshaping of your edges so they don't snag on the people around you, the translation of your instincts into a language the workplace understands. Even in the jobs I've loved, I've done this math. Am I allowed to be fully myself here? And if I try, what will it cost me? It's a slow kind of exhaustion, not the kind that leaves you collapsed at the end of the day, but the kind that hums in the background, so constant you stop noticing it until suddenly you do. I've walked into rooms where everything seemed fine on the surface, people smiling, notes being taken, timelines mapped, but underneath something felt wrong. Sometimes the structure works, but the people inside it are aching. And that includes me. There have been seasons when I wore the role like a tailored jacket, crisp, professional, perfectly in place. And then I'd get into the car and stare through the windshield for a few moments before turning the key, feeling restless, or worse, numb, wondering if I'd actually been myself that day, or just played the part I knew I could play well. The truth is, I'm good at the part. It fits. People trust it. Sometimes they even celebrate it. But every so often, I catch my reflection in it, and I don't recognize who I'm looking at. That's the work beneath the work, the quiet negotiation between survival and authenticity. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think many people are performing versions of themselves, not because they're dishonest, but because the system doesn't always have room for their full truth. And the danger, at least for me, is that you can go months like this before realizing you're emptying out. Still productive, still meeting expectations, but disconnected from anything that feels like yours. When that happens, I have to pause and ask, who am I becoming in this role? What parts of myself have I silenced just to stay in the room? And what would it feel like to let the mask slip even a little? I don't have a tidy answer, but I know this is the edge I'm on right now. Not the edge of burnout, not quite, more like the edge of truth. Part 2, the space between us. The work beneath the work isn't just what we carry inside of us. It's also what happens in the space between us. That space, the air, the energy, the unspoken agreements and hesitations, shapes everything. I've always been aware of it. Even as a child, I could feel the temperature of a room shift before anyone said a word. I could sense tension hanging there, waiting to be cut. I could feel when someone was bracing themselves or when they simply wanted to be left alone. I didn't have a name for it then. Now, I call it presence, or awareness, or maybe just paying attention. And it's followed me into my work. I notice what isn't said. The way someone's posture changes when a topic comes up. The way a voice flattens when their idea is dismissed. We talk so often about communication and collaboration, but those are just the outer layers. What matters is what fills them. And that's connection, or the lack of it. I've walked into workplaces where the air feels heavy, where people are careful with each other to the point of stiffness. And I've been in spaces that feel lighter, open enough for people to be unpolished, messy, real. It's in those moments, when posturing drops, that I remember why I believe in work at all. But not every space allows for that. The truth is, we are always becoming someone in response to the people around us, expanding or contracting, speaking or holding back, softening or sharpening. It's not about weakness. It's about survival, and sometimes even about care. But if we aren't paying attention, that shape-shifting can pull us further from our center. The space between us isn't always neutral. It can hold history. It can hold hierarchy. It can hold every unspoken rule about what counts as professional. Sometimes it holds possibility. I can remember a conversation years ago where something shifted midstream. It began formal, all timelines and deliverables, and then one of us asked, "Why do you do this work?" That question cracked the surface. We stopped posturing. We showed up fully. And the work we did after that was different. It was alive. Moments like that remind me that work isn't only about what we produce. It's about what we're willing to risk to be real and what we're willing to hold in that shared space. Part 3, what we're not saying. There have been so many moments when I've known the truth before anyone dared to name it. You can feel it in the way eyes avoid meeting yours, in the tension that seems to hum beneath the surface, in the overly careful phrasing of a sentence that was clearly rewritten in someone's head 3 times before they spoke it aloud. Yet, I've stayed quiet. Not because I didn't want to speak, not because I lacked the courage, but because I knew what speaking would cost. Workplaces have an unspoken rule. Truth is welcome only if it can be digested, if it's wrapped in data, if it's softened into opportunity, if it's presented as a challenge instead of a wound. But some truths are not neat. They arrive jagged, like a tremor, shaking the ground we built our plans on. Even as a consultant, someone brought in to uncover the real issues, I found that telling the truth doesn't guarantee it will be received. And when you work in a space that quietly values comfort over honesty, the temptation to soften becomes strong. And I've caught myself wondering, am I softening too much? Have I traded truth for likability? Because the truth is, speaking too soon can just be as damaging as not speaking at all. I've been in rooms where I shared something raw and necessary, only to watch the room retreat. Not because they disagreed, but because they weren't ready. That kind of silence that follows is not neutral. It can be lonely. Sometimes silence is the right choice, not as avoidance, not as withdrawal, but as care. waiting for the ground to be ready to hold the weight of what needs to be said. But here's the thing. Truth waits. It lingers. It settles into our bodies, into our attention, into the quiet glances we exchange when no one else is looking. And eventually, it finds a way out. When it does, it's rarely perfect. It might be messy, it might be sharp, but it's real. And without that realness, the space between us becomes performance. So the work, the real work, is in holding the truth with enough care that it can be received, not just spoken. It's remembering that the delivery matters as much as the content, that timing is part of truth, that staying present after speaking it may be more important than the words themselves. Because the truth is not just what we say, it's how we say it, when we say it, and what happens after the words land. Part 4, returning to ourselves and each other. There are days when I look back on a conversation or the absence of one and feel a small ache in my chest. It's subtle, but I know it. The moment I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. The moment I was gracious when what I really felt was grief. The moment I smiled for the sake of keeping a meeting light and then sat in silence for 10 minutes after the laptop closed, staring at the wall. We carry so many versions of ourselves through this work. And sometimes the most honest versions don't make it into the room. Not because they're wrong, but because they're soft or tired or unsure. And in most places, we've been taught that there's no room for softness or fatigue or uncertainty that doesn't resolve neatly into a productive hack. But when I leave those parts of myself behind, I feel the absence, even if no one else notices. Because the deepest kind of exhaustion isn't from long hours or stacked meetings. It's from disconnection, from drifting little by little away from my own compass, from saying what's expected rather than what's true in my body, from agreeing to move the meeting along when I should have asked us to slow down. That drift doesn't just create distance from myself. It can create distance from others too. Relationships that used to feel warm start to feel careful. Conversations that used to flow become stilted. You can't always trace it to one moment. It's the buildup of small ones. That's rupture. And rupture is part of any relationship. Personal, professional, it doesn't matter. But what we rarely talk about is return. How do you find your way back? Back to yourself. Back to someone else. Back to the kind of presence you meant to bring in the first place. I've had to do that. Look someone in the eye and say, I think I disappeared for a while. I'm trying to come back. Returning requires honesty, but not the kind that insists you were right all along. It's the kind that says, I see now what I didn't see then. I want to be here differently. And the same is true when we return to ourselves. It means sitting with the parts we left behind, saying, I miss you. What do you need from me so you can come back? Returning is rarely dramatic. It's a soft reentry, a breath before saying, actually, I'd like to revisit what I said earlier. It's the choice to close the distance, even a little. Rupture will happen. Return is a choice, and that choice brings connection back to life. Part 5, the trace we leave. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about meaning and its quieter companion, legacy. Not the grand kind that comes with titles, monuments, or stories in the paper, but the kind we build quietly to make sense of why we work at all. Sometimes I believe I'm building something lasting, that the hours I spend in strategy sessions and deep listening in helping people see each other more clearly will leave something behind that matters. Other days, it feels like a story I tell myself so I can keep going. Because the reality is, much of what we create gets dismantled. The project we poured months into is scrapped in a budget shift. The team we built is restructured. The feedback we gave It's filtered until it no longer resembles the truth we meant to share. And in those moments, I wonder, did any of it matter? Or am I just telling myself it did so I can keep moving? But then there are moments, small, almost missable, when someone says, that question you asked has stayed with me. Or months later, they tell me a conversation shifted something for them. Those moments remind me that maybe meaning isn't about permanence. Maybe it's about presence. And maybe legacy is smaller than we think. Not lesser, just quieter. It's the trace we leave and how someone felt when we were with them. It's the tone we used when they were unsure. The choice we made when no one was watching. Question is, are we choosing that trace or letting it happen passively? A protective story says, this matters because I need it to. A chosen story says, this matters because I made it matter. And that choice, that conscious shaping, is what builds the kind of legacy I care about now. Not a monument, not a brand, but a pattern of small, consistent choices that say, this is who I choose to be today. So as you step away from this episode, I won't ask what you're building. I'll ask, what kind of presence are you offering? What kind of truth are you living? And if no one ever remembers your name, what do you hope they feel because you were here? Maybe that's the trace that matters most. Thank you for being with me on this episode of Unboxing OD. If today's episode stirred something in you where you'd like to share your own reflections, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That information is in the show notes. Till next time, keep reflecting, keep connecting, and keep unboxing what it means to truly show up in your work and in your life. Take care.